Hey guys, welcome back to Selden Tutorials. This is Ahmed talking again. Today I have a quick video about enabling SSH on the Cisco router, and at the same time I'm gonna change the default SSH port so that you have some kind of protection and your router not gonna be detected from the scanners and the play hackers on the internet, right? So right now I have a Cisco router ASR 1002 in my terminal, and this is the IP of the ASR 6666, right? So by default the telnet is enabled on that router. So as we see, once I do the telnet on the router, I have a user access verification. That means that the telnet service is working on that router. But in that video I'm gonna change that behavior. I want to enable the SSH because, as we know, the SSH is secured, and if somebody like man in the middle could gather the information, he will not be able to see the password like the telnet, right? So it's not like the telnet. If you have a telnet, you're gonna be in a big problem, you're gonna be in big trouble. Okay, so once you are using the SSH connection and somebody was between you and the router, like man in the middle or whatever you have, you will have some kind of protection and your passwords will be saved, right? So as we see, here is my quick tutorial. First of all, we're gonna define a domain name on the router, then we're gonna create the key. I'm using a 1024 key. Then we just tell the router to use the version 2 for the SSH, right? Then we can go directly to the VTY lines, which are responsible for the telnet or the SSH, or you can say in general for the management plan access, right? Then you can say transport input SSH. So that's gonna be sufficient if you just want to enable the SSH and move it to your router setting. But there is another thing, which is it changing the SSH port. You know, if you have a router on the production network, and you may be opening that router to the internet, and you wanna keep the router open, or you don't want to enable the access list on the one interface, or etc., and you are going to change the SSH port from 22 to other port like 3300 or anything you want, you can use the command IP SSH port, the port that you want to have, then rotary, then number. So by default I'm gonna change the number 1. Okay, then once I do that, I go back to the line VTY lines and say, hey, please use the rotary number 1. That means that if somebody make a connection to that port, right, it's gonna be matched to the SSH connection. So without applying this rule, if anyone could make a connection to your router, alright, he will be able to use the port 22, which is the default one, and the port 3030. This is by default. But if you want to close the 22 port and force all the other administrators or the people that are managing your router to use the other port that you wanna put, you have to create an access list. As we see, I have just created an access list that's called deny SSH, and within this access list I'm just saying, hey, deny any connection that is coming or hitting my router, which is telnet, which is SSH, and only permit the connection that's gonna be 3300. Okay, once I do that, once I match the access list on my router, I'm gonna move back to my VTY lines and say, hey, please access class deny SSH, and the direction is gonna be in. What does that mean? It's meaning that anyone coming to your router to the SSH, right, it will be blocked if it is initiating the port 22, but it's gonna be allowed if it was using the other port, right? The last thing, which is the authentication, how I'm gonna authenticate the local user. So I will create a local user on the router, and I go to the line V2I section and say, hey, please go with the authentication local. If you have a radius server, if you have a TACAC server, etc., you can set up your AAA connection. But in my scenario right now, it's gonna be simple, right? So I'm gonna using the local authentication. So let's jump in and try this setting, right? I'm gonna copy. I say conf t, then paste. Then I'm gonna say IPSS version 2. Then I'm gonna create this access list as well. I hit exit again. Then under the V2I section, you know what? Let me show you the like that. Okay, it's saying that the local is not defined, but the route gonna accept this, right? If you say login authentication, maybe local capital, I think. But anyway, if you have with this warning, right? Even if you have this warning, the router is gonna authenticate the connection using the local database, right? For the users that is on your local database. So I'm gonna create a user name. Let's say Seldom Tots, password, privilege. And here's the privilege. I'm gonna give it full. The password gonna be Seldom Tutorials. Okay, I'm gonna hit enter. Now I'm gonna jump back again and say let's try telnet to that server. Sorry, let's try to telnet that router. As you see, we have a connection refused. So why it's refused? Because we are using transport input SSH, and right here I'm trying to establish a telnet, but the router will only be accepting the SSH. So how about if we create SSH connection like SSH minus login Seldom Tutorials minus port 22 and the IP of my router. As we see, we also have that connection on the port 22 is also refused. Why? Because we have an access list that's denying the port 22. So what we have? We have only rotary number 1, which is matching the port this one, and also we have an access list right here which is matching that port. So let's try to do SSH. Say SSH minus login Seldom Tutorials minus port 3300. Then I'm gonna select the IP address of my router. I'm gonna hit enter. As we see, it succeeded. Why? Because right now we have the router that is listening to that port, which is the non-default port. Right, so let's try again to connect over the telnet. As we see, we have the connection refused. So what about if we connect over the SSH over 22? As we see, we have also the 22 port is blocked. So we have protected the router right now. We changed it, the non-default SSH. Sorry, we have changed the default port to non-default port. We protected the router from being scanned from the hackers over the internet, from the spammers or the guys who's making denial of service. And we also could connect to the router from the new port. So in the end, I hope this video had been informative for you, and would like to thank you for viewing. If you like the video, kindly subscribe so that you have new videos in the next time. Thank you so much. See you next time with a new video.